Hey guys, Blackbart here, bringing you a little bit different paced video than I've done in the past, since most of mine are about video games. I wanted to address flat earthers in as respectful a way as I possibly can, while trying to enlighten a few of them, hopefully, at least one or two, um, in some pretty major flaws in their theories. And kind of move from there. And we're gonna. You can see behind me, I have the flat Earth model, which is the most consistent that I've seen. Some have an enveloping firmament, others have different ideas, but this is the general idea as far as the flat Earth goes. And I wanted to take it from the perspective of looking at their model and not nitpicking where a city is or whatever. I don't really care about that. I'm going to look at something that I haven't seen anybody else talk about within the science community, the flat earth community, whatever. Haven't seen it at all. And it comes down to a basic understanding of mathematics, specifically to do with sunsets, and not in the way that everybody thinks, and parallel lines. So you could see here, this is about what it would be. So you have the Earth down here, up directly above it is going to be the cloud lining, and then way up here is the moon and the sun on the flat Earth model. And where I run into problems is when you look at a sunset, and I'm not talking about it disappearing, so we'll stop there, just listen to the entire argument. When you are looking up at the clouds, the sun can be underneath them. And the flat Earth model does not address this at all. And we'll get into a couple of things here. We're going to first off go over the definition of parallel. Extending in the same direction everywhere equidistant, which means that the line here, given mountain ranges, whatnot, I don't really care. The overall thing is flat on this. The clouds are relatively flat as well. And then the sun and the moon have to be flat because it's sunlight somewhere in the world at any given time. So those distances shouldn't change at all. Based on, and I'm not talking about a couple 100,000 feet, or a couple thousand feet. That's not a big deal when you're talking about these kinds of ranges here. So mountain ranges, I don't really care about. Deep deserts, stuff like that. Not a big deal. But the overall line here is flat, and I've made basically a picture here. So you have the sun and the moon relatively above the clouds. Here's the cloud line, and here's the ground line for a flat Earth model specifically. So these lines can never touch or cross. Okay, there's no amount of distortion or weird stuff that should cause things coming from a different direction. Now we'll take a look at some pictures. This is the sun, a normal sun, but from an airplane. This is above the clouds, looking down on top of the clouds, and how the sun's up high and it's casting light. We've all seen these kinds of pictures before. They're awesomely beautiful, but they all look about the same, and that's great. They should. Where I have a problem is they look extremely similar to the other variation, where you see them from underneath as well. And then as you get closer, so you have up above, you have about even, where you have the tops aren't quite lit, but the sides are mostly lit, and the bottoms really aren't. And you get pictures like this. And then you move over into most of the sunset pictures that we have, which are from the ground's perspective, looking up, where the light is directly hitting the bottom of the clouds all the way through. Okay? These are just, you can pull up any sunset pictures, and this is what they look like. Where I have a problem with this is on the flat Earth model. When you go back to this, there is no point where the sun or the moon should ever be underneath the clouds, casting direct light up onto the clouds. The top makes sense. The side, maybe if you got really far away, because parallel lines, as you get closer, those lines get where it's casting light from can look more like it's straight on from the side, but never where it's underneath. I also wanted to add in these couple of pictures that I found extremely interesting. I've never actually seen these kinds of pictures before. It was really cool. This is a picture of the cloud line with direct sunlight. You can see the red underneath. Direct sunlight hitting the bottoms of the clouds without hitting the tops of the clouds. The light that's this brighter color that's up here is reflective from the atmosphere, and it's casting a little bit of light down, but this is you can tell that this is not direct sunlight as opposed to this red light that's underneath here. And I have a second one. This one looks really neat. So you can see here the atmosphere is actually bringing down this really light blue light, and then you can see underneath is a very clear orange in this case light. It just looks really neat. And this, I think, just goes to prove further that this is direct sunlight coming from underneath. And you can see there's many different kinds of pictures like this, and you see that this is all coming from the opposite direction, is reflective light off the atmosphere. Really, really, really interesting stuff. So what I've done is I've crudely made this picture here, and it basically shows the only things that could ever be lit are the side and the bottom, or in the top, of the clouds, compared to where the land is and where the sun is. So as far as you take this to the side, it's always going to be at the same height from the earth. Doesn't matter how far you go this way, you're only ever going to light the side of the cloud and the top of the cloud. If you take a look at a rotation, mind you, this picture, again, extremely crude. We're looking down on top of the earth, given a little bit of tilt, whatever you want to get into the major details, but this is a view of the clouds. So the sunlight is coming from however far away it is, 93 million miles away. I'm not going to throw that in there, but I guess I will. That sunlight's coming across, and you can see here it can very easily light the top of a cloud, and this can rotate all the way around. As you rotate in, you can see how when it rotates away, that sunlight can squeak in between the cloud cover and the ground and actually come underneath the cloud line. And then as it starts to rotate away further, then you deal with the sunlight disappearing. And you can look up and you can see that any day of the year. That's not completely overcast. But if you look at a sunset, that's how it reacts on the clouds. As opposed to where did my picture go? Here, no matter how far away this gets or how dark it gets, it doesn't ever go down and shine light up at the clouds. Now, the other argument I've seen is that there's reflection off the ground. That would mean that a sunset over the water would look different than a sunset over a city, or a sunset over in Ohio where there's no real reflective anything. It's all corn, basically, corn and trees, and then the same thing to be said around a city where it's all concrete. Those don't reflect at the same rates, so having it bounce off of the ground and then here doesn't make much sense either. So it's just it's a very basic idea, and I find it strange that despite the fact that this is very straightforward and easy for anyone to understand, people still believe in the flat earth, or at least don't challenge it. If you do believe that, you should be challenged. People who believe in a round earth or heliocentric, and scientists challenge everything all the time. They never take anything for face value. They do the experiments themselves to an exact science. If The other problem I see a lot of people doing within the flat earth community are doing experiments where they guesstimate things instead of going down the line and doing the experiments the exact same way every time, or they use equations that are mathematical equations that are estimations, like the average drop over distance. Most people are using a parabolic equation, which is an estimation, and it's really not that close to correct, especially over a longer distance. It's just there to get you close, as opposed to the real ones, which are a lot more complicated to do, and most people don't understand how to do them. But this is very basic. You don't need to know any math on being able to just understand how light works, where it's coming from, and how that compares to the flat earth model, which doesn't make sense in any circumstance. I find, and I try to be very careful on this subject when I talk to people about it, but I find that people relate this directly to religion a lot of times. Not all the time, but a lot of times people are relating this to the Bible. They bring up Bible verses and things like this. And what I have to say to them is this has absolutely no bearing on their faith. This has disproving this one subject has absolutely nothing to do with their faith. That should not be affected by this. Things said in that Bible, in the Bible specifically, you have to think as far as through a social distorted lens. So when those books were written, or letters, technically, most of them, they were written through the eyes of a person who took the knowledge of the time at face value. And the knowledge at the time of a lot of those books being written was that the earth was flat, and they didn't know anything else outside of that. So there's certain comments that were said that are put in there in that context. Religious figures over the course of time have pushed that those words are direct words of God. And I believe, me personally, that all of the stories, the storylines, and the lessons to be learned are what come from that, not the direct verbiage. So keep that in mind. Things like another example that I bring up is pig. People didn't eat pig for a very long time because it got people sick all the time. We came up with the advent of refrigeration and proper cooking, and that's no longer an issue. You can eat pig without getting sick as long as you follow those steps. That's another social distortion of the biblical verse. So I try to just make sure that those are two separate things, and by disproving this has no bearing on whether or not you have faith within your religious structure. I try not to get too much into that, but it's definitely a touchy subject, to say the least. Anyway, I really hope this kind of sinks in, and if you guys have some comments, feel free to leave them down below. I'm happy to answer what I can. I wanted to make sure that this wasn't too this is flat Earth compared to globe Earth for laymen, and there's no real mathematics in this. It's just straight logic. So please, please, please think about it. Don't just throw out what I have to say because I believe in a round Earth. Actually think about it and look at the model and really ask yourself, does this make sense? If it doesn't, please say something. That's like, it's huge. Don't just follow these people who believe in one or the other blindly. Think about it and move on. One last thing, I usually just stick to video games and nothing serious, but if you guys like this kind of content or other philosophical debates or anything else you want to hear about, let me know. And if you have any questions, you can always hop by. I'm on Twitch 4 to 5 days a week. You can see the link up there, and hopefully you guys come by and say nice things. At least start up general conversation and try to not be rude. All right. Thank you. Bye.